Welcome to this first episode of the Pod of Cheap Pops. My name is Scott.
I'm Tyler Bean.
And this is kind of something that's been in the works for a while.
Yeah, we've been tossing around the idea for a long time and finally doing the thing.
So this is going to be a professional wrestling sports entertainment podcast. We talked about doing a podcast either 2018, 2019. When did we meet? When did you start?
I started working at 2017.
You started in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's weird because I was up between 2018 2019 when we met. But yeah, so me and Tyler worked together at a place of work.
Yeah.
I guess we could say it was a TV station. We have communications background, so we both worked at a TV station. And I was like the only wrestling fan there that like really liked wrestling. And I the one thing I remember was like you were like, "Oh yeah, I like wrestling too." And I'm like, "All right," like you'd probably be like, "I like that WWF stuff."
I think the thing that kind of kept us from talking about it often is like we worked opposite shifts, so it was like whenever I told people like on my shift kind of hinted that I was a wrestling fan, they always said like, "Oh, you need to talk to Scott about that." It was like, "Oh, I'll have to talk to the Scott guy at some point."
Yeah, because I was on the morning shift and you were on the evening shift. Yep. But you started evenings.
Yeah, that's where it started. Yeah,
and so like I would get off at 1 o'clock, you'd start at 2 o'clock. So like, and there'd be once in a while you fill in for. There's a noon show at noon. Yeah. There would be a newscast, so like you'd fill in, and that's like the time we got to see each other. And I remember one story in particular, and I don't know if this is where it's cemented. Like, I should be best friends with this guy. Is we were talking about the same wrestler, but in a way, I figured out. Like at first, we were talking differently about it, and I'm like, I think we're both talking about Pentagon Jr. Because like there was some kind of way, like I was like. Oh yeah, there's this like mass wrestler and stuff like that, and like he says Cero Miedo. I can't speak Spanish that well, so if it came off really weird, I'm sorry. But and then like, oh yeah, there's a guy like that says that too, and I was like, I think we're both talking about Pentagon. So like, it wasn't like oh yeah, I remember Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold, and, all that stuff. You mentioned Pentagon, which like this was before AEW. Started.
Yeah, I think we'll get into it a little more when we kind of talk about our history of wrestling. But yeah, at that time, it was like I was just getting back into wrestling, and he was one of the guys that was kind of like, reintroducing me to like why I liked wrestling in the first place. He was one of the guys.
Yeah, because I remember I went to a wrestling show. He was there, and he was the Impact World Champion at the time. Mm-hmm. So I think that's kind of around the time we talked about it. So again, like it wasn't that like big notable name like John Cena. He does that thing with his hand in front of his face, kind of a thing.
Yeah, he was not like a household name at all.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so we just kept talking about wrestling, and like I remember we were like friends on Facebook, and like I was like, man, it'd be cool to do like a wrestling podcast, and you're like, me too, and I was like. That brother's meme. Like, did we just become best friends? So, and again, you started in 2017, so it had to be 2018. We met up at a coffee shop. Mm-hmm. We are from the Des Moines, Iowa area, so that will come into play obviously at some point because you'll see why. So in Des Moines, we met at this coffee shop. And we like started talking about the podcast. Like we were like talking about content and stuff and like doing it. And I bitched out. I was like, I don't like, we had a great time. But then like a couple weeks later, I was like, I don't know if I can like handle like doing this just yet. And it all fell apart.
and I know like I am the kind of person that like I'll meet up with friends and we'll have like these great ideas. And then, like, as soon as one, like, hurdle gets in the way, my motivation is just, like, shot. So I need to, like, have someone constantly be, like, pushing me to, accomplish the thing. And, like, now I feel like we're both in a position that we're able to do this. And I feel like you have really been kind of pushing forward, like, okay, we're going to do this and this and this. And now we're here.
There we are. And so... at the end of 2019, I left the TV station we both worked at, and I went through a very, like, antisocial, like, phase. Like, I deleted Facebook, and that's where we talk to each other. So, like, I think I had your phone number, but I can't remember if I did or not. But I left Facebook, and then I left the station, and that was that. You know what I mean? And we lost touch for, like, at least 3 years. 2. Because I reached out to you in 2022, mid-2022.
Yeah.
Started talking again about stuff. Because I think it was kind of around the time that, like, Vince McMahon left WWE initially.
Yeah.
And, like, started talking about, like, ooh, what could go on kind of a thing. And I remember, like, I think the start of 2023, we really, like, got to be, like, really talking. Because I remember the Royal Rumble. Like, we talked a lot about that Royal Rumble 2023.
Yeah.
Bloodlines, Sami Zayn, stuff like that. We did predictions against each other. He won every time. Dick.
The only thing I'm good at.
And so I was like, I think I need to hang out with this kid. So I was like, we need to hang out and just fucking watch some, like, old school wrestling. And I went over to your place, and I was like, you know, this is, like, the first time we've seen each other in, like, 3 years in person. But we didn't miss a beat.
Yeah. It was...
It just felt like we were, like, just picking up where we left off kind of a thing. We watched 2001, it was WrestleMania 17 from 2001.
Which you can't go wrong.
Yeah. Top to bottom, great card. And then it's just like that, the whole podcasting talk started again, kind of a thing. And, like, it felt more ready this time. I felt like maybe back then we weren't in the best place to do this, you know? So, like, now it felt right, you know? And here we are.
Yeah.
The Pod of Cheap Pops, which you named. You named this one.
I feel like we went back and forth, but I feel like it was a joint.
It was a joint. The biggest thing is, like you said, I kind of want to have a podcast where, like, the name of it is about, like, cheap pop.
Yeah, I guess now we can kind of get into, like, what this is gonna be about. So, like, the main thing is we didn't want it to be just another, like, wrestling, you know, follow up or, like, wrestling review podcast, because there's just all those out there. And one of my favorite things about wrestling is how it is beyond, like, just the like, in-ring product. Like, everyone knows who The Rock is, everyone knows Hulk Hogan. Like, what happened in pop culture to kind of, you know, get someone from having, like, the world's worst finisher, leg drop, and now he's, like, the biggest name on the planet. Like what, like, I don't know, I've always been interested in, like, the kind of pop culture and, like, beyond wrestling, what is kind of in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, definitely. So when you're like, I want it, at first we were going to do Cheap Pop Podcast. There's already one name that. You guys beat us to the punch, or we're just late to the worm. But, like, Pod of Cheap Pops. And, like, for some reason, in my head, the first thing, I know what cheap pop is. Being a wrestling fan, I know what it is. First thing that came to mind was generic soda.
Yeah.
So with wrestling, everybody has a gimmick, right? So our gimmick is going to be, you don't see it right now because this is audio for everybody who's not aware, but I thought, why don't we be our gimmick to have, like, we drink generic sodas. So we have some sodas here that we're going to crack open right now.
Oh, that's good crack.
Yeah. We got some cups here, and we can even talk about the brands of cheap soda, cheap pop, if you will. Oh, this thing's hard to get. I'm trying to open up this thing of ice, because obviously this has been room temperature since I've bought it. Would you like some ice, sir?
Thank you.
What cup are you drinking out of?
The Brookfield Zoo, Chicago Zoological Society.
Yes, I went there. It's obviously that's where I got it from. You ever been to Brookfield Zoo?
I have not.
Yeah,
I'm assuming it's in Chicago.
Yeah, it's in the Chicagoland area. I'm drinking from a Star Wars cup because I'm also a Star Wars nerd. but my in-laws are from Chicagoland, so that's where I got it from. Also, from Chicagoland, we don't have this here in the Des Moines, Iowa area, is the Meyer brand. It's a pomegranate spiced cider soda. It's caffeine free, limited edition because it's a wintertime thing.
My favorite part about this bottle is like when you hear pomegranate spiced cider, the first thing I think of is that's got to be caffeinated. But oh no, they let you know that's caffeine free. That's huge on the bottle.
Yeah, I mean they have to be very transparent. Like this is caffeine free.
I always get hyped up on pomegranate.
It's got a penguin on it. There's some snowflakes on here. I got this when I went out to Chicagoland, and we were talking about this podcast. And I thought we were going to start in December. So I was like, this would be a nice thing in December.
Yeah.
It's currently February of the next year, 2024. Might as well just still drink it. It's, it's still good. So I figured to, just let's get that ASMR of the pouring. You like ASMR at all?
In small doses. At a certain point, it's like, what am I doing?
Me and my wife just recently had this, like, discussion of, like, ASMR, and I'm like, there's some ASMRs that like bastardize like the ASMR, because like there is like we watch like restocking stuff on TikTok and like it's ASMR. Anyway, this is not an ASMR podcast. Well, this is what we want to dink it and drink it, even though that's a good mythical morning thing. Shouldn't say that, but that's fine. It tastes flat already.
Yeah, it tastes a little weak, which I think that's just a pomegranate thing. Like, I feel like I love like pomegranate berry flavored drinks and stuff, but pomegranate is always like they really dial it down in the flavor department.
Yeah. We for this show, like you said, you want to look at the pop culture aspect of wrestling.
Yeah.
There are kind of little nuggets through history. Obviously, it starts with Hulk Hogan, and that's kind of where we're going to be starting a little bit with Hogan and stuff. Love him, hate him, he did something for wrestling.
Yeah.
You know.
And don't worry, we will hate him.
We will hate him. It's fine. I was never a Hogan guy. Like, his era, like, by the time I started watching, like, he was in WCW, and, like, I remember more of, like, the early 2000s where, like, after WCW folded, he wasn't there until 2002, I think. Yeah, like 2002, because 2018 was the Rock Hogan thing. We're not. I'm not a fan of Hogan.
No.
You're more of the pop culture guy. I'm more of the historical guy.
Yeah,
I like history stuff. And again, going back to what I said, we're from the Des Moines, Iowa area, and the historical stuff of like Des Moines, because I've even read into like just the history of the city of Des Moines and stuff like that. And I was like, what has Des Moines and even Iowa in general contributed, quote unquote, I guess, to the wrestling world? I know with Iowa in general, you have to go back like 100 years in order to like find wrestling like history that's historical. Like, you hear the name Frank Gotch. He's from Humboldt, Iowa. There was a small little thing that probably not a lot of people know of. There was 5 promoters that met in Waterloo, Iowa, and created this unknown thing called the National Wrestling Alliance. That happened here. I'm obviously being sarcastic because people know about the National Wrestling Alliance. Sorry, we're playing footsie. So it's there. That history's too far away. Obviously,
like even one like I don't follow history as much, but I know like Dan Gable. He is like he's like the most famous Iowan of all time. When he competed in the Olympics, he competed against the Iron Sheik, and they were like friends.
Yeah. Dan Gable has a museum up in Waterloo. Every year they do the National Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I've been to that museum. I went some year, I don't remember. 2018, 2019. That thing all blurs together to me all of a sudden. It's a really cool place. He has is Dan Gable's more known about the collegiate style of wrestling, like you just said with the Olympics, but he has obviously professional wrestling stuff there. He has like the Lou Thesz version of like the NWA title. He has, some like the AWA tag title. So he has like certain memorabilia up there that's like iconic, especially they have a desk from Frank Gotch. That's wrestling memorabilia that's cool. Worth the shit. And like the other thing, Seth Rollins is from Iowa. I've never bumped into him at all. I have seen him wrestle in front of like 70 people, which
that's
is
cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It was at an armory in Perry, Iowa. Wrestled in front of like 70 people. And it was back when it was the Tyler Black era.
I was going to ask, yeah.
And what's funny is that we knew the promoter a little bit. During intermission, he comes out to us and he's like, "Did Tyler Black like curse a little too much?"
Someone in the back, not
enough. Like this was more personally like to us. Like, he came up to us and he's like, "Did he curse a little too much?" Because they wanted to be a family-friendly wrestling show. So it's like it's been cool to see like from where Tyler Black came from to where he's at now, kind of a thing. But when it like what has happened in Iowa that is historical, kind of a thing. So we're not gonna go through like this like, oh, in like 1918 at the carnival there was Farmer Burns versus somebody. We're gonna talk about televised wrestling events that has happened in Iowa. It starts obviously next episode we'll actually go into our actual real regularly scheduled programming content kind of a thing. We'll start in 1989. There is some stuff in 87 that was televised, but it's not on the network, it's not on Peacock, so that stuff we can't really do. So we'll start in 89, we'll go chronologically, give a little history about the venues that it happened in, talk about just, there's going to be a lot of research that I'm going to do, because I don't want to act like I'm a know-it-all either about stuff. So, like, if you hear me talk about stuff, probably 99.9% of it is me having to look it up, especially, like, in 89 to, like, most of the 90s I don't remember stuff or even know stuff kind of a thing. So... it's going to be called Right Here in Iowa is the name of that segment because, like think of Mick Foley where he's like, right here in this city, and the cheap pop, gotta lean into the content somehow or the gimmick. So,
yeah, you're either happy to be there or you hate their sports team. Those are the options.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. And like we don't have sports teams.
No,
I mean here in Des Moines are like they're all like developmental.
Yeah, we have all the best, second tier sports.
Yeah, they either feed into like Chicago teams, Minnesota teams, all that stuff. We have all the developmentals. So, in your segment, by the way, talking about pop culture again, leaning into
my segment's gonna be called "Open Up a Can of Pop Culture." The classic Stone Cold Steve Austin can of whoop ass idea behind that, but I will always try and tie it into whatever episode of wrestling we watch for that episode. So, for example, the first two pop culture picks are two Hulk Hogan movies because he was the biggest thing around during those episodes. So he's like the entire the face of those episodes. So he has plenty of terrible movies to pick from. So it's been pretty fun so far. But besides that, I have ideas for at some point I absolutely want to cover. I've been trying to get this on vinyl. The Macho Man Randy Savage rap album that he had. It is.
Oh yeah.
It is fantastic. It is fantastic. We will definitely cover that at some point. But there's just so many different avenues of how wrestling has kind of infiltrated pop culture, and we're going to try and cover as many different things as possible.
And we're going to try. I think the big thing is try to be, what's that word, synergy with, because our first two like right here in Iowa, the first 2 wrestling shows we're gonna do, Hogan's is a big star.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you got Hogan movies where he's, I want to say quote unquote big star because he's not the greatest.
Yeah, there's a reason he didn't have a career like The Rock or John Cena.
Yeah,
like he made a lot of movies. Not a lot of people watch those movies.
Yeah. So we're gonna try to tie whatever my segment's about to your segment, but I started looking into like some of them. And I'm like, boy, there's some not movie stars in here. Like one of there's a Monday Night Raw where Sunny's like the big star. She has a movie, but I don't think we want to review it because it's a pornographic movie.
I don't like. Did they record her trial on CNN? Maybe we could watch that.
I don't even think she had enough coverage for that. So we just want to have this show be fun. These are the first 2 segments. We are like pretty dead set on. I know we've been in talks of doing other segments. We'll try to incorporate in. So it's going to start out as like a 2-segment show. Again, it's about fun. It's not about... We're not wrestling journalists. I know the biggest thing right now going on is people fancying themselves as a wrestling journalist. We're not that. We don't want to be that kind of a thing. And we're not going to be know-it-alls kind of a thing. Again, a lot of my research is based... Like, it's not me knowing stuff because it's just, I know it just out of my heart. It's... Whatever I'm going to say on this podcast, I probably had to go to Wikipedia or do a bunch of Google searches or just try to figure out kind of a thing, like what is going on. So, yeah.
So I think what we want to do with the rest of this episode is kind of talk about our own personal histories with wrestling.
Definitely. What do you remember about wrestling like as a kid?
So as a kid, I remember my mom was a huge wrestling fan, and her mom was a huge wrestling fan, which always surprised me because my grandma was very, very, very religious, very she was in a Catholic, the mother of a Catholic farm family. My mom was one of 17 kids. They created their own workforce. And so to hear my grandma was a huge wrestling fan, it just blew my mind, just imagining her knitting while say kick Hogan's ass. I just couldn't imagine. But so the first wrestling I remember watching as a kid was WCW. I loved Goldberg and his streak. I was really into that as a kid, and the one quote unquote match that I is just in my brain as one of the first that I vividly remember was Hulk Hogan versus the Giant, but it was a monster truck battle on top of a skyscraper, and it ended with Hulk Hogan not necessarily pushing, but inadvertently causing the Giant to fall off the building. And then I think he was back in a week or 2. So it didn't make any sense. But I was like, oh, he killed the guy. And I was ecstatic. I was losing my mind.
I love how there's a lot of attempted murder. I think we should do a wrestling crime segment.
What am I the most recent was the 2020 Money in the Bank where multiple people got
Aleister Black and Rey Mysterio.
Yeah, got shoved off the building.
Fuck you.
And they were pretty much radio silent for a little while. And I know social media was all are they dead? You haven't said anything, so we have to assume they're dead.
I always think about that line from Anchorman where it's yeah, I threw a trident at a guy. Yeah, Brick killed a guy.
You're gonna want to lay low for a while.
Baron Corbin killed 2 men. Want to lay low.
So yeah, I was really big into WCW. I loved the cruiserweight division. That is still one of my all-time favorite aspects of wrestling. Rey Mysterio is probably in my top 3 of all time. I absolutely love Rey Mysterio. I've kind of started collecting lucha masks. Just friends will go visit somewhere and they're hey, we found this and thought you'd like it. So just I've always loved the kind of lucha style, and so yeah, watched a lot of WCW, and then eventually into WWF, WWE, you know, and so I watched like up till maybe the start of high school, and I fell out of it a while, so that's probably like around like 2007, 2008, and then I got back into it for.
Do you remember at all like what caused you to fall out of it?
It was just like, I don't know. I just had other interests at the time. I wasn't, because there wasn't really a whole lot of other, like, my mom would watch it, but she wasn't like a fan. Like I couldn't like talk to her about like wrestling. Like she just enjoyed it, but she didn't really have any opinions or anything. So it was like I felt like I was the only one watching it. So then it just kind of fizzled out a bit, and then by the time I went to college, I like completely had stopped watching. So I kind of missed like the whole big rise of CM Punk and like the pipe bomb and stuff. I just wasn't watching during any of that. Missed a good amount of like John Cena being at the top is staying on the top. Like I was like aware and I would like follow along a little bit, but wasn't watching any of it. Just wasn't super interested into it. And then so after college, what got me back into wrestling after probably like 5 years or so was because I was just kind of bored with it. It seemed like it was all the same, and there wasn't a whole lot of like change or variety for me. And then I found the show Lucha Underground, and it is like,
oh yeah,
it like reignited my love of wrestling, because it's a Spanish soap opera with wrestling. It's just so cheesy, over the top, dramatic. It is. And I loved every second of it. So that got me back into it. And then that led me to NXT, which I loved, that black and gold brand of NXT with like just Tommaso Ciampa as the heel champion was one of the greatest of all time. It's just so entertaining to watch. And then that got me. So now I'm a fan of like mainstream WWE again. But that's kind of my journey out of it and then back into it.
Yeah. I remember we were more of a WWF like household, but like I couldn't or tell you like the first thing I saw. Like there's people that are like, I remember the first like person I saw and I fell in love immediately. I don't remember that. I always remember like wrestling being in our house, but we never got like pay-per-views. We never like, and we weren't consistent on like watching it. I think it was just more of like a casual thing if time served right. I know my brother was more of like a wrestling fan. I do have a lot of hard times remembering like earlier childhood stuff. That's probably something I should talk to therapy about. But the one thing I do remember is like in like 93, I want to say the year was 93. I remember going to a live wrestling show. We won tickets through a contest that like my brother and sister did, where you color in a picture of a wrestler, and we won tickets. They weren't great tickets. Like it wasn't like ringside.
No, it was behind a pillar.
We were, and I like the only thing I remember is like Yokozuna versus Bret Hart. And the one thing I remember is like this overwhelming sensation that like I just watched Bret Hart get murdered. And a lot of people will be like, oh, it was when Yokozuna did the bonsai drop. I'm like, no. What I remember is him getting thrown out of the ring and thinking, that man's dead. He's so dead. So it's very casual through the 90s. I think 99 to like 2000 was like when I started to get into it. Like, became a big Hardy Boys fan.
Oh, yeah. I was a huge Hardy Boys.
I had a fucking Matt and Jeff poster. Because it was kind of around when they were like in the New Brood into like becoming their own thing. The ladder match with Edge and Christian. Like I remember they used to have the tapes, like the fucking VHS tapes, and like it was like a highlight reel of that tag team ladder match, and then the tables match with the Dudleys at Royal Rumble 2000. Then at WrestleMania 2000, they had the triangle ladder match. This was before they called it TLC. Like those three matches, and it was a highlight reel, and I watched the fuck out of those. So it was around like 99, 2000 that I started getting into it. And then it was through the early 2000s I've gone to some Monday Night Raws here in Iowa. I went to WrestleMania 22 in Chicago. I went to WrestleMania 23 in Detroit, 24 in Orlando, and 25 in Houston. So I've been to 4 WrestleManias. I was at the Money in the Bank 2011, the CM Punk pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that's all you can really call it.
Yeah,
You know?
that was the big draw.
There happened to be a couple ladder matches there, but it was CM Punk in the Bank or something like that. Yeah. But what's interesting is that for a couple of those WrestleManias, I think I tuned out. The one thing I remember, the reason why I asked you if you remember what made you tune out, I remember what made me tune out, and it's probably the stupidest of reasons. It was the week before you found out Hornswoggle was the illegitimate child of Vince McMahon.
That sounds better.
Because I remember the last thing of that before the reveal. I remember it was like the lawyer or like the fucking, I don't know, Maury Povich type fucking person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. He said the clue was things are looking up. That was a clue. And like in my mind I didn't think, oh, that's fucking Hornswoggle or whatever. But I just remember thinking, this is fucking lame. So it was even before finding out that Hornswoggle was the illegitimate child thing. So that's when I tuned out. I still went to those WrestleManias. Like 25? A, I don't remember much. And B, I don't remember how what brought everything to the table kind of thing. Like even though they play the promos beforehand, I'm still like, yeah. And then obviously I wasn't tuned in 2011. It's just I was hearing about all the pipe bomb stuff from my brother. So I was there. It was a really interesting fucking atmosphere, you know. And then I started around 2015. I me and my girlfriend at the time, now wife, we moved in together, and I started watching YouTube stuff, and I was like, oh shit, they got clips of WWE and stuff, and you see they'll show you fucking what happens on Monday Night Raw. You get to see the finishes and stuff, and I was like, this is how I'm keeping up. I don't have cable, keeping up with it, and I found myself before work, because this was when I was working at the TV station. I was working night side, so I was working the shift that you were working when we met. I'd wake up and I'm like, I got shit to do around here, but I wanted to be entertained by something, because I was like, I'm on my own. I don't know what the fuck to do, kind of a thing. So on YouTube, there's a bunch of podcasts from wrestlers, like Talk is Jericho. This is the Stone Cold podcast. So it was before the WWE. He had his own podcast.
Yeah, before they televised it.
Yeah, he had his own podcast. And then it went to the WWE as a podcast, and then now he has the Broken Skull Sessions. I'd listen to that stuff and just soak it in and shit. And then my wife surprised me. She says, I got you the WWE Network, and the first pay-per-view we watched was Money in the Bank 2016, and it was the one where Dean Ambrose won, and it was the Shield thing where Roman went in as champion, Seth won, Dean cashed in, all in a span of that main event. What's interesting is that in this time, this was before I knew you, and again, my brother's a big wrestling fan, but he's kind of one of those jaded ones. Yeah. If you're listening to this, brother, sorry, you're a jaded wrestling fan, but I can't talk to him about wrestling. But I had this friends that were not wrestling fans at all, know fuck all about wrestling, watch wrestling with me. And it was so fucking bizarre that they would sit there and you get zero reaction out of them. No oh my god, or oh that's so cool. Yeah. Just dead ass silent watching it. And I'd ask them what they think about it, and they're like, oh, this ain't really my thing. And it's but what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah. So that's one thing. Since I've started watching regularly again, my girlfriend Lizzie, she's not a at the start she was not a wrestling fan at all. It was more we would put on and watch it, just she would do that just to appease me because she knew I enjoyed it. But after watching for a couple weeks, she found her way to get entertainment out of it. She she didn't know any of the wrestlers' names, so she gave them all nicknames, and that entertained her. And her whole thing is like whenever there's like two, like the heel and the face, like face to face, do promos. She's always in the background going like kiss, kiss, kiss. Like she loves the kind of the borderline homosexuality of it all. She thinks that's fantastic. But so yeah, I think watching with someone who's not a fan, like it is a different experience because for a little bit you're trying to not like overplay your hand of like how much you're enjoying it, and then also you want to like know what they're thinking about it. And so yeah, it's an interesting experience as opposed to like watching with like other fans or like being at the event.
Yeah, I could tell. What's interesting is that they didn't really say much, but we watched fucking I forget the Battleground. Maybe it was the Punjabi, Jinder Mahal Punjabi match. And I can tell they thought it fucking sucked. And it's like, as non-fans, if you can see this sucks, it sucks more for us. Yeah, and like so many more people. Like it started out as 2 people, and it went up to like 4 or 5 people watching fucking wrestling with these non-wrestling fans, kind of a thing. And like I remember one instance where it took me a while to figure out how to explain it, but there was a DQ finish, and they announced the winner was like the other person. You know what I mean? So it was Charlotte versus Natalya at Hell in the Cell, and Natalya was the champion heel, Charlotte was the face, and there was a chair spot involved, like the chair, like there's a chair shot, DQ, and they announced that Charlotte was the winner by DQ, but Natalya kept the belt. And my friends were like, how does that happen?
Yeah.
And as a wrestling fan, it's so ingrained, and I understand it. But in that fucking moment, I couldn't tell you. I could not tell you how to explain it. And finally, it took me a while to be like, oh, that's because it was a DQ finish. Belts don't change hands. But they still didn't really understand it. So... so there's that, and then from 2016 to now, like I'd fade in and out and stuff, because like that was a lot of people talk about from 2016 to like just very recently. It's garbage programming, and it is. And also the other thing about me is that I became a ring announcer, and there's a St. Louis promotion. It's no longer open, but it's called PWCS. Down in St. Louis area, I became the ring announcer. That was pretty fun. And kind of stemming off of the opinions of non-wrestling fans is one of the friends that I was talking about watching wrestling with me went with me to St. Louis because my wife's like, I don't want you to drive alone. Kind of a thing. Going down 6 hours from here. So I took him, and he set up the wrestling show, and no sold at all. Like, just, there was nothing from him. And after the show, my friend, who's the promoter, booker, whatever you want to call him, looks right at him and says, what did you think of the show? And we're all like, he's not a wrestling fan. And he goes, his opinion matters more.
Exactly.
Because he's not a wrestling fan. He's not, again, the jaded wrestling fan is a real thing. You know, I don't want to, like, harp on all that stuff, but I know people have a certain expectation out of wrestling, and when they don't get it or they don't feel that magic, they just let go. And I know we, like, you and me talked about fading in and out of wrestling and stuff like that. It happens, but you have to try to find something good about it. It's like Star Wars. The original trilogy was great, but that was a bar set way too high, and we're all chasing that high. There's some stuff that gets there, like The Mandalorian and stuff like that, but you gotta get through the prequels. There's some stuff of the sequels I like and hate, so it's kind of like that, like, find what's good in it, all of it.
Yeah, we've covered everything we want to, like, give you an idea where we're coming from, our backgrounds, and what to expect in the future. I guess we can talk about, like, what shows we're covering for the first episode.
Yeah, next episode we're going to do right here in Iowa, 1989 Saturday Night Main Event, coming from Des Moines. Hogan versus Bossman in the cage, the blue cage.
Yeah,
the vintage blue cage.
It's interesting.
Everybody loves that thing though. So and that's a big match, but it's not the main event, which is interesting. So we're going to talk about that, and that is also in conjunction with No Holds Barred, Hogan's movie, because Zeus is at Saturday Night Main Event.
He makes an appearance. Yeah.
Zeus was in Des Moines.
Which, when we were first deciding what we wanted to cover, I knew I wanted to cover No Holds Barred, like, for the first episode, because I was like, this movie is just ridiculous, and it's just fun to cover. And we didn't know that, like, Zeus was in the wrestling episode. So when it happened, we're like, oh, God, it's meant to be.
Yeah, like, it's just meant to be, because, like, I was like, all right, we're going to start with this Saturday Night Main Event. We saw Zeus, and the wrestling show happened May 27th, and then in, like, early June, like June 2nd, we'll talk more about it next episode, No Holds Barred came out in theaters. So it's like, holy shit, like, this is a good starting point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, be patient with us. This is our first thing. You know, it's going to suck in the beginning. Hopefully we get better over time. You know, give us a rating on wherever you get podcasts. I think that's a thing they say.
Yeah.
Share it to your friends. We should have social media, right?
Yep.
Because you're in charge of that. We'll have social media, find Pot of Cheap Pops or whatever. Yeah, so thank you for listening.